At Sight and Scene, we feature the innovators, disruptors, and changemakers using reality capture technology to drive real impact. These are the people who saw a problem, challenged the status quo, and took action, whether restoring ecosystems, improving resilience, or transforming infrastructure.
They bring a deep sense of responsibility and stewardship to their work, leveraging technologies like drones, laser scanning, GIS, and mapping to create meaningful change. More than just experts, they're storytellers, sharing their journeys and the why behind their work. Our mission is to amplify their voices, educate, and inspire others to push boundaries and take action.
Sight and Scene.
There are things that you can do, and these small impacts, I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but like the ripple effect that can be experienced by other people around you just by small gestures of change and positivity in the right direction, I think has an impact, and people need to know their own power. Hey everyone, you found us again for another episode of Sight and Scene. We are on episode 7. And I feel like, Scott, we're starting to get our foundation, our footing underneath us. We just had our first guest on the last episode. And how are you feeling about things so far?
Yeah, really good. I thought for a first guest, Kyle was fantastic. I really encourage everyone to listen to that episode. It came out great. And starting to feel like a professional podcaster now. Like one guest in the bag. That's exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. I think having that first interview went really well. We were excited about it, and we do have many more already in the queue. We're coordinating with folks where we have recordings next week, so lots more exciting things to come. One thing that Scott and I were talking about as we're getting further into this endeavor is just our shared passion for environmental causes and for sustainable endeavors and resilience in our everyday lives, not only just with the environment, with culture, with people, with communities. So, we both recognize this fairly recently, not that we have these sentiments, but the fact that some of the earlier episodes we did, we tiptoed around a couple subjects and, at risk of maybe offending some people, or because the way things have become so politicized that we didn't want to alienate anybody, but at the same time, it just didn't feel right. So we wanted to have a shorter episode today where we're refocusing our podcast a little bit. We have a new description or mission statement of our podcast, and I think that's going to guide us into the future on how the types of guests we bring, how we're still talking about reality capture tools and all of the things that we love in this space, but also bringing in the business use cases of those. But we're also going to be talking about how these are being used for good, for the environment, for people, for communities. And last episode was a great example of that with Kyle and how he was talking about drones being used for search and rescue. So, it's really, I think it's really exciting for us because it definitely aligns with our own values. And, we don't see a whole lot of those kinds of discussions happening in this space. There's, of course, other fantastic podcasts out there in the geomatics world, and we're happy to share the love of those folks too. We could give a shout out to the Geoholics, of course. Those guys are fantastic. The Reality Capture Network, but many more. But Scott, how are you feeling about this shift and just bringing this type of content to folks?
Yeah, and I think in our talks, it's like you said, the business use cases aren't really going away. And as a matter of fact, I think we both realize that like in our own businesses, it's a big focus already. I think of all the work I've done with Friends of the Bay here. Some of my favorite work has been stuff that has that environmental responsibility and stewardship angle to it.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it still is just a very natural extension of what we do in our business. And I think it's a unique way to bring another perspective to the show. I think it really helps us stand out a little bit and be its own thing.
Agreed. Yeah, I am really excited at some of the guests that we have coming up. And
exactly,
we could maybe give a little sneak peek at some of those, but folks that are having a huge impact and doing really, really awesome things for marine life, for coastal habitats, for, the search and rescue with Kyle. So we're going to get we're going to talk a little bit more about this focus moving forward. But before we do, just a quick check-in on, it's been a couple weeks since we connected on our last recording with Kyle. So, how are things going on your front?
Good. It's spring almost. Like New York continues to tease good weather. It's cold again, but it was a nice weekend and then it got cold. So we're like in fall spring for sure here. But with that comes LiDAR. It's the perfect time for LiDAR work. I'm sure people out there are really, really busy with LiDAR work because we have the perfect blend of it's getting warmer out, but the leaves are still off the trees. So
does Punxsutawney Phil come out with a little sign that says it's time for LiDAR?
Yeah, exactly. They bring him out and they see if he's ready for drone flying.
I love that movie. That movie is so good.
Fantastic movie too. It's actually one of my favorites.
Yeah, we're of the Bill Murray era, so I can. Same here in Portland. Like this is my favorite time of the year in Portland. Like it still rains quite a bit this time of year, but the sun is actually shining today. But the amount of flora and flowering trees that are here in Portland that start to, these magnolias that bud here in the next 2 to 3 weeks is just this. I mean, it's epic. Like these trees, you just can't even believe what you're seeing. And the smells right now walking around the neighborhood, there's some flowering plants coming out and just the smells hit you when you walk by.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yes, it's here, it's coming. So, with that, of course, comes the busy season as well. So I think we're both gearing up in our own respective markets here with people are starting. I'm getting more activity. People are reaching out and inquiring about jobs coming up this summer and trying to get in the queue. So that's always an exciting time for our business because we, in the AEC space, I think we do tend to, it does revolve to an extent around the seasons. Of course, construction and designing happens all year round, but generally people don't like to be digging big holes in the ground here in Portland when it's pouring down rain, because then you're dewatering and you have to contend with all that. But of course it still happens. It's a big city. So it's, I think, exciting things ahead.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into our segment piece with fun facts, and Scott, I'm going to hand it off to you to share what you have for today's fun fact.
Sure. Maybe some people saw this in the news, but I did not. I was going and looking for a fun fact, and I realized that we actually had a lunar landing this weekend, which is very cool. Yeah, and actually a private company. And so I learned a lot about this. NASA has apparently has this commercial payload program now where they're basically saying, okay, we're going to team up with private companies that have interesting payloads, and they kind of facilitate the launch and still do what NASA does, but then the payload is privately owned, designed, and operated.
Interesting.
So this lunar lander is called Blue Ghost from a company called Firefly Aerospace based out of Texas. And I was the more I read, the more interested I got, because it's actually, I don't think it's the first, but it is a lunar lander that uses photogrammetry as part of its landing sequence. So it's actually taking pictures of the moon's surface as it lands, doing photogrammetry kind of on the fly to better position itself for landing. So
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, more advanced than my Mavic, I think. But it's very, very cool. And even more interestingly, since we talked about this and we'll talk about this more, this is the first lunar lander to record and track a GPS signal from the moon. And it's using Earth satellites to do so. Obviously, we don't have GPS on the moon. So one of the tests they were doing is trying to see, can we use the GPS constellation all the way in Earth to track it? Because, you do get a GPS signal out there. It's delayed. It has some, there's a lot of issues to overcome with its distance, but the infrastructure is there on our planet. So the idea is, could that be used for at least basic navigation on the moon?
Wow.
Really exciting.
That is. And I can't imagine we're too far away from the moon having its own satellites to facilitate more of these types of missions to the moon. Yeah. That's so cool that they used photogrammetry and orthomosaics to map the ground in real time. Obviously, that's no issues with vegetation up there.
No, it's actually, I'm a little jealous of that. That's a pretty easy place to map Well, I think it sounds like it is.
Yeah. Speaking of the moon, have you seen that show For All Mankind?
I have not yet.
Oh my
I've
gosh,
heard of it
put
though.
it on your list.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic show. I think there's 6, maybe even 7 seasons, and it starts all the way back out to the early days of the space program, and
Cool.
it aligns itself pretty closely with historical facts, but then it starts to become more and more science fiction as the years go
Okay.
on, because they're going like taking these decades. But it's really well done, and it's enjoyable for anybody that I suppose people that are a little bit older that remember the days of the lunar landing and those Apollo missions. It's a highly entertaining show and really well done.
Cool. I'll
Yeah.
definitely have to check that out.
Yeah. My fun fact is centered around springtime here. I think even though we might be just slightly premature with spring in the air, but I can't help my excitement again for the reasons I already mentioned, with the spring here in Portland being so incredible. But I'm going to share about the Portland Japanese Gardens here, which is in Washington Park. So for those of you who don't know, Portland has some of the most incredible parks maintained by Parks and Rec in the city. And I think per capita, we have the most green space of any major city. And the Japanese Garden was designed by a famed Japanese designer in 1963, Professor Takuma Tono, and he's renowned in Japan as one of the greatest landscape architects, and fostering cultural understanding between Japan and the U.S. was a big focus on these gardens. So it spans roughly 12 acres. It's absolutely incredible, but globally it is recognized as one of, outside of Japan, one of the most authentic and meticulously crafted Japanese gardens in the world outside of Japan. So it's gotten all kinds of accolades around the world, and it's visited by dignitaries and lots of people from Japan who come over, and they're just blown away, like, wow, this is incredible. So if you ever are in Portland, you should definitely check out the Japanese gardens here in Portland. They are an incredible sight, and just I can't wait to do my spring visit and get my dose of just serenity and balance and harmony. I could use some.
Yeah, we could all use a little bit of that. And you're giving me more and more reasons to finally get out to Portland each time we do an episode. So
Yeah.
it's climbing very high on my list of cities I still need to get out to.
Well, you're welcome anytime. Yeah. And
awesome.
Springtime here is again particularly incredible because you have the mountains. Portland, where we're situated, we have the Cascade Mountains like an hour and a half away, and you have the ocean an hour and a half away. And it's not like a tropical ocean. I think people understand that. They've probably seen pictures of the Oregon coast. It's rugged. It's the water is always cold, but it is absolutely stunning. So in any given day, you can be in the spring, you can be up skiing in the mountains, and then later that day, if you're adventurous enough, and you could drive and then be with your feet in the Pacific Ocean and the sunshine on your face. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty great. But I don't want to talk it up too much because lots of people are moving here, and it's expensive. So yeah. But where isn't expensive these days? Okay, let's kind of get into the meat of it here. This refocus we have, I think we touched on a few of the reasons why we're moving in this direction and wanting to highlight and celebrate the people that are doing amazing things with this technology. And again, we mentioned a few, like there are other amazing podcasts out there in this space. We want to share other resources with our community because I think it's important that there's so much that we can gain from having knowledgeable people in our industry give us fantastic advice and knowledge, and talk about the struggles that this industry is experiencing in some ways or the other, whether that's, the skilled labor to do some of this work, the shortage of skilled labor. So there's lots of things to talk about. And I think having a slightly unique spin that is focused on more of this sustainable approach and these tools being used for good is super exciting for us.
Yeah. And, I think just a push to do our own thing, right? I definitely am somebody who likes to try and put as unique a spin on things as I can. I started my company by saying I don't want to go down the traditional path, so to speak. And And it's just like we said, it's kind of funny because just so happens that an environmental side is both something that I think we both connected with in the first place. And again, it just seems to actually be a majority of my clients and a majority of the work that I have been doing. I think I'm a product of the environment I grew up in.
Yeah,
Long Island is a big place for natural preservation. And so this is just something that's always spoken to me. It's great because, I want to do a podcast about things I'm passionate about and things that are important to me, important to you.
yeah,
And I just have been hearing more and more that this is something that I don't think gets enough coverage, especially in reality capture.
agreed. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right by saying the industry in the world is moving in this direction,
Yeah.
contrary to some of the steps that are, maybe two steps forward, one step back, or maybe it's two steps back, one step forward. No, but I think
to be determined there.
the world is moving in this direction,
Yeah.
and for good reasons. And I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think I said in a couple episodes ago, I think, unfortunately, I feel like it's going to take a little bit of a wake up call for people to really like be, holy crap, like we really do need to hunker down and do more. We're going to remain focused on the impact and try to keep a positive, we want to focus on solutions. We don't necessarily want to be the doom and gloom, like, oh, it's so bad and how are we going to do this? Like we feel that it is going to be something that requires behavioral changes of cultures and society coupled with technology. I think those two are going to help us solve the challenges of today and into the future. And I think we're definitely want to focus on those. So
yeah, and I think this sort of just leads into the fact that when I've been motivated to do things, it's usually been hearing someone else's story myself. And so it's kind of a pass the buck thing for me too, right? Where I think the more we have stories and showcase people that can tell those and are doing really cool things, like that's a motivating force for other people.
For sure.
And
yeah. And I'm glad you shared a little bit about Long Island too, just because my background, like how this got imprinted in me as a young person, as I grew up in Northwest Indiana outside of Chicago. And it was, it was a commuter suburb of Chicago. It was it was like an hour to get in, but it was still a small town. Like we had about 16,000 people when I was growing up, and still lots of wooded areas. And I spent practically my whole childhood out in the woods. We would be gone dusk to dawn, just playing in the woods, building forts. Just having that experience was very transformative for me, just in my love of nature. But at the same time, adjacent to the forest, there was a new subdivision being built. So we were either in the forest or we were over in the subdivision, a little bit of shenanigans over there when the builders would leave for the day. And we're like climbing around these half-built houses, like throwing bricks into the foundations, doing stupid kid stuff that, we do. But I definitely think that fostered my love of both the natural world and the built environment. And I think that's stuck with me for all of my career. And it, I definitely went through these cycles where I was building stuff and managing projects that at my core felt I was really conflicted. I'm building a 6,000 square foot home on the side of a ski slope that someone's only going to use 2 weeks out of the year. That we built it as sustainably as we knew how to at that time. But at the same time, there's just, it was really conflicting for me to see all of that input into, all those resources going into something that was going to be used so infrequently. So, those types of experiences pushed me in a direction throughout my career that wanted to do more from an awareness, from an activism standpoint. I spent the last 9, well, not the last 9, but of the last 10 years, 9 of those, I was the director of construction for a sustainable design build firm. So working on zero energy homes and selecting the best, healthiest materials to go into these buildings, because in the built environment, sometimes you're selecting the least bad materials to go into your building. And that's not the way things should work. And when Sometimes when you get into it, and the more you learn and the more you understand, the more you know, there comes this, it's not, sometimes it could feel crushing, of like, oh my gosh, how do I even make a dent in
Right.
this massive juggernaut of an industry with all of these things in place and these systemic issues that, support these things? Like, how do you make a dent? You got to start somewhere. And I think a lot of our youth in this world feel this bit of a, like, they don't know how to deal with the grief that
Yeah.
comes with this knowledge of what's happening and
I,
how things are changing.
yeah, I've certainly felt that in my generation. I think certainly I feel like my generation was the first to grow up with the concept of climate change. I think being like a thing since we were kids,
Yeah.
and so that's always been a side of it there. I'll add too that my own experience. One, it's funny you talk about the woods. Mine is the beach, right? I mean,
Yeah.
town I grew up in is called Oyster Bay, and so I've been sailing and on the water ever since, and I love even marine biology as a kid.
Yeah.
We have all these volunteer classes that a lot of great groups have offered. And so that combined with, the concern of climate change always put that same thing on me. It's funny, you go to Oyster Bay and I mean, people are starting to talk about their properties losing value because of rising sea levels. And
Right.
I never had heard that conversation like in day to day before, and starting to hear it more and more. And so that's one, there's the depressing side to that. But the other side of that is I think I've been super fortunate in my life to work with a group of people that lots of my clients that both run businesses and also do it in an environmentally sustainable way.
Yeah.
Because we live in a capitalist society. We can't just drop everything and and just stop everything. That's just not, unfortunately, realistic. So I think finding the way to make it work sustainably, within current businesses and getting people who run businesses to care about this stuff is the way forward. And I've been so fortunate that I think I've been more optimistic because of the other groups that I've worked with, some of the groups that are my clients and stuff like that. So, I think that's what came to the idea to do this podcast. I've seen in my own personal and professional life a way forward through this, and I think you have as well.
Yeah, definitely. I know that there's lots of people doing amazing things out there. And sometimes when you just get in this repeat loop of just seeing all the things that aren't going in the right direction, I think that can be hard for people to grapple. And, I think all the more reason why we want to focus on the positive things that are happening, particularly through the lens of these reality capture tools. Question about Oyster Bay. Are there good oysters there?
Yeah, and the oyster. Oh man, I could do a whole episode on the oyster debacles and stuff like that. But yes, believe it or not, I'll give the real short version of this.
Yeah.
For a long, long time, our oysters have been unsustainably harvested there, controlled by a fairly large company. This is perfect as it in a nutshell right here.
Yeah.
And just this past year, the town and a bunch of groups got together and actually finally terminated the lease. I think it was like a 20 or 15-year lease this company had on it. And they've done a lot of replanting. They've done a lot of that kind of work. They basically, long story short, they would use like hydraulic dredging almost to like bring up oysters, which is really, really not environmentally sustainable. And now they've finally done replanting. And I think it was just so funny because that was a topic that like you could talk to anybody, like completely separate from politics, and every single person in the town wants the oysters to be sustainably farmed. It's just, It's funny because it makes me very optimistic, because I don't think you really ran into anybody who felt like, no, they should absolutely keep on doing the hydraulic dredging. That's totally something we want. So yeah, a big deal. And they've been replanting a lot there. So the oysters are getting better, which is a good sign. Yeah.
Yeah. I love, oh man, we there's a couple bays out here on the West Coast where, we'll go camping. I'll take the kids and we'll go camping up in the Olympic Peninsula, and, what's the name of it? Walapia Bay up in the Washington coast. Cool. You can go up there and you just go to any little shack or food cart or stand on the side of the road, and they have the most amazing oysters. You're just awesome. Like, oh yeah. Love it.
Cool.
Yeah. So, maybe as we transition again, I want to just say that we're focusing on the positive things that are happening. And I only want to repeat this because me having, teenage kids and seeing how they're exposed to the news and giving them a way to deal emotionally
Yeah.
deal with all the things that they hear and feeling at the same time powerless because they're not of voting age yet. They feel like, well, what can I do? And there are things that you can do. And these small impacts, I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but like the ripple effect that can be experienced by other people around you just by small gestures of change and positivity in the right direction, I think has an impact, and people need to know their own power in this whole equation. And I think that's a good thing to focus on and really help people see and hear those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of, I'm just looking at a few of our notes here, like the marine side of things. We do plan on actually one of our next upcoming guests. He heads up the Caribbean division for the Nature Conservancy and doing all of the scientific work. He's the lead scientist. So we're super excited to have him on and talk about that. And the Caribbean for me, I can't wait to hear his stories because the Caribbean is a special place for me. I've spent quite a bit of time down there. But yeah, I think I feel like we're heading in the right direction.
Exactly. Like this is the beauty of it to me, because I listen to lots of reality capture podcasts, and again, work Geoholics and RCN, awesome ones, highly recommend them, and they do great work, right? So I am always like, well, how can we bring on a guest that I would not normally think about bring on in just the podcast that I listen to in my day to day? And this is the beauty of it. I think having Steve on is going to be so great, because I just don't think that's the kind of perspective you get from, let's just say, like a typical engineering podcast or a typical AEC podcast. But it overlaps so much with what the AEC world is doing. We've got remote sensing. We'll talk about GIS. We'll talk about so many things that are still so relevant to what I do as an AEC focused business owner. But it's just coming from somebody that whose voice I wouldn't have really heard before. And that's the exciting part here. Just really, really, I think the variety and the breadth of guests that we've got coming up is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm hyped myself. So I hope that people out there are hyped too.
Yeah. Same with me. And for me too, it's like this little dose of activism and positive vibes that we can put out into the world. And I'm just excited to do that. Okay. So we're going to keep this relatively short. And Scott, I don't know if you have any more to share, but I think with all of this, we have recrafted our mission statement, if you will, of our podcast. And we do want to share that with folks. But before we do, any other thoughts you have on the subject, or do we just might keep this pretty short and sweet today?
I say we keep it pretty short and sweet. I think now everyone's got a good idea of where our focus is. So yeah, I say let's kick off the mission statement.
Okay. All right. So here it is. At Sight and Scene, we feature the innovators, disruptors, and changemakers using reality capture technology to drive real impact. These are the people who saw a problem, challenged the status quo, and took action, whether restoring ecosystems, improving resilience, or transforming infrastructure.
And they bring a deep sense of responsibility and stewardship to their work, leveraging technologies like drones, laser scanning, GIS, and mapping to create meaningful change. More than just experts, they're storytellers, sharing their journeys and the why behind their work. And our mission is to amplify their voices, educate, and inspire others to push boundaries and take action.
Awesome. And we're so excited to do just that. So we're glad you're with us, and would love to hear any comments you have related to our focus and our direction. And of course, if you are someone who is passionate about these things and doing work in this industry with these tools, we would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have questions, all the above, we want to hear from you. We're here to spread the good work of the world with these tools, and we're happy to be a voice that you guys can tune into and hopefully leave with more knowledge and excitement and positivity of the things that are happening.
Yeah. And if you think the person in our mission statement sounds like you, absolutely reach out. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to showcase the work you're doing.
Awesome. Great. Scott,
Cool.
good to see you as always. And
You
we'll
too,
see
Mike.
you next week.
Take it easy.
Okay.